She still wore the collar her last owner gave her. The cowboy cut it off and buried it in the dirt. The small town lay quiet under the blazing sun, the dusty roads winding between a handful of wooden buildings, the kind of town where everyone knew each other by name, and strangers were noticed immediately. On this particular afternoon, the gentle creak of a wagon wheel announced someone new. A young woman stepped down carefully, her small bag resting lightly on her shoulder. She paused for a moment, letting her eyes sweep over the town, as if memorizing every detail, every sign, every shadow. She had been traveling for days, sleeping under the stars and waking with the sun. Her boots were worn, her dress simple, but there was a kind of grace in the way she carried herself, a quiet beauty that seemed almost out of place in the rough edges of the town. She walked slowly toward the saloon, her footsteps stirring up small clouds of dust. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, whiskey, and old wood. The bartender glanced up, wiping his hands on a rag, and raised an eyebrow. The woman smiled politely, but did not speak immediately. Instead, she sat near the window, looking out as if the town itself was part of a larger story she had been following for months. A few curious glances came her way. People whispered softly among themselves, wondering who she might be. In a town like this, newcomers did not go unnoticed. She finally spoke in a soft voice that carried just enough strength to be heard. "I'm only staying for one night," she said. "By morning, I'll leave again." Her words were clear, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The bartender nodded, slightly amused, yet impressed by her honesty. No one had to chase after strangers here. They usually stayed or moved on quietly. Across the saloon, a man leaned against the wooden counter. He was broad-shouldered, with the kind of rugged look that spoke of years working under the sun, mending fences, and handling horses. His hair was a bit long, windswept, and his hands were strong, with faint scars that told stories of hard labor. He had been in the town all his life, mostly keeping to himself except for work and occasional evenings at the saloon. But something about the way the woman moved, the careful way she observed everything, drew his attention immediately. She caught him looking and gave a small, polite nod. He returned it, curious, wondering if she knew how unusual it was for someone to catch his attention so quickly. He didn't know her, yet there was something in her eyes, a mix of weariness and quiet strength, that made him want to know more. The woman asked the bartender for a simple meal, bread, cheese, and water. She didn't want anything fancy, didn't ask for more than she needed. The cowboy watched her, noticing the faint lines of travel on her face, the way her fingers brushed her hair back from her cheeks. There was a sense of caution in her movements, a carefulness that told him she had lived through things that made trust difficult. Yet, despite that caution, she held herself with a quiet dignity, refusing to let the world see her struggle. After a while, the cowboy found himself walking toward her, pretending to adjust his hat, pretending to check the stock of goods at the saloon counter. When he finally reached her table, he spoke in a voice that was deep but gentle. "Traveling far?" he asked. She looked up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, the air between them seemed to pause, like a brief pause in a long song. "Yes," she said softly. "Far enough to lose track of days. But I'll be gone by morning." Her words were calm, but there was a hint of sadness beneath them, a shadow that seemed to stretch longer than her time in the town. He smiled slightly, not pushing, not asking her to stay. There was something about her that deserved patience. "That's fair," he said. "A night's company is better than none. I'm Jack, by the way?" She nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips.
"I'm Emily," she replied. "Thank you, Jack."
"For not asking me to stay?" They talked lightly at first. Jack asked about her travels, about the places she had seen. She spoke in general terms, hinting at mountains, rivers, and towns without naming them, as if to keep herself untangled from the past. She listened to Jack talk about his life too, about the ranch, about the work and quiet moments that filled his days. Their conversation flowed naturally, neither rushing, both finding comfort in the simple exchange. By late afternoon, Jack suggested walking her horse to the edge of town to give it some fresh water. She agreed, grateful for the company. As they walked, the golden light of the sun made the dust rise in small, sparkling clouds, and the quiet sounds of the town, the distant hammering of a nail, the low neigh of a horse, the faint laughter of children, felt like a gentle symphony. Emily's horse was small but strong, a reflection of her own resilience. Jack noticed the way she treated the animal, speaking softly, brushing it with care. He admired her patience and kindness. In turn, she noticed his hands, calloused but gentle, the way he moved with ease around animals. Without words, a silent understanding grew between them, a connection deeper than simple attraction. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Emily and Jack found themselves sitting on a small hill overlooking the town. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the town below looked peaceful, almost like a painting. Emily remained quiet, taking it all in. Jack didn't speak at first either, respecting the space between them. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's beautiful," she said. "Places like this make you forget time for a little while." Jack nodded. "It does. Makes you feel like the world is simple, even if it's not." They sat together, letting the quiet stretch between them, neither forcing conversation, neither rushing. For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. For Jack, watching her, hearing her voice, seeing her eyes light up in the fading sun, it was as if the world had opened just for this moment. When they returned to the town, the saloon had filled slightly with locals finishing their day. Emily thanked Jack quietly and returned to her room above the saloon. She unpacked her small bag, setting out only what she needed. Jack lingered outside for a while, leaning against the wooden railing, thinking about the woman who had appeared so suddenly in his quiet life. Though she had said she would leave by morning, Jack felt something shift inside him. There was a hope, cautious and fragile, that perhaps the night could stretch just a little longer. But he reminded himself gently, she had made her choice, and he would respect it. Still, watching her from the window, he couldn't help but wonder about the story behind her eyes, the journey that had brought her here, and whether one night could ever be enough. As the night deepened, Emily lay in her small bed, thinking about the day. She had felt warmth she hadn't expected, a kindness that surprised her. Yet the promise to leave by morning weighed on her heart. She knew the roads called her name, but for the first time in a long time, she wondered if perhaps stopping, even for a short while, could change something. Outside, the town grew quiet. Only the wind whispered through the streets, and the occasional sound of a horse shifting in its stable broke the stillness. Jack finally turned in for the night, though sleep was difficult. His thoughts kept returning to Emily, to the gentle curve of her smile, the calm way she had carried herself, and the feeling that sometimes even a single day could leave a mark on a lifetime. And so, in the small town beneath the wide sky, two lives touched briefly yet meaningfully. Neither fully understood how the morning would come, what choices would be made, or whether their paths would cross again. All they knew was the present, the quiet companionship, and the unspoken bond that had begun to form. The next morning arrived with the soft light of dawn spilling over the horizon. The town was quiet, The streets empty except for the occasional rooster crowing or the distant clatter of a wagon. Emily woke early, as she often did on her travels, careful not to make a sound as she packed her small bag. She had promised herself she would leave by morning, and she intended to keep that promise. Yet there was a subtle pull she couldn't explain, a feeling that staying just a little longer might not be such a bad thing. Downstairs, the saloon was still quiet. Jack had already been up for some time, taking care of small chores before the town fully woke. He noticed the early light catching Emily's hair as she descended the stairs, her eyes quietly alert to everything around her. She smiled politely at him, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. Their glance carried a connection neither could fully explain, as if the briefness of her stay made each small interaction more significant. Jack approached her, leaning casually against the wooden counter. "Morning," he said softly. "You're up early." Emily nodded. "I like to see the sunrise," she said. Her voice was gentle, yet carried a quiet determination. "It helps me remember why I keep moving." Jack's gaze lingered on her for a moment. "You travel a lot?" he asked. "Seems like you've been on the road for years." Emily smiled faintly. "Years, maybe. But it doesn't feel like it. Time is strange when you're moving constantly. Days blend together, places blur. Sometimes I forget the last town I slept in." She paused, and her eyes softened. "But this place feels different, even if only for a day." Jack listened carefully, sensing the layers beneath her words. There was a story she wasn't telling, a past that had shaped her careful, deliberate steps. He wanted to ask, to uncover it, but he respected her boundaries. Instead, he offered a small smile. "I know what you mean," he said. "This town, it's quiet. People notice, but they leave you to your thoughts. It's good for that." Emily nodded, appreciating his understanding. They shared a small breakfast in silence: bread, cheese, and a few slices of fruit she had bought from the general store. The morning air filtered through the open windows, carrying the scent of fresh hay and the faint aroma of coffee brewing in the background. It was a simple meal, but in its simplicity there was comfort, a shared sense of humanity. After breakfast, Jack offered to show Emily around the outskirts of the town. She hesitated for a moment, remembering her promise to leave, but then nodded. Walking beside him, she noticed the ranch in the distance, the fields stretching out under the morning sun, and the horses grazing quietly. The land seemed alive, peaceful, and yet full of purpose. Jack spoke little, letting the scene speak for itself. He pointed out the different animals, explained the routines of the ranch, and occasionally shared a story about a horse or a cow that had caused trouble in the past. Emily listened intently, asking questions that revealed her curiosity and her respect for the life he led. As they walked, a subtle closeness grew between them. Emily found herself relaxing in his presence, the caution she usually carried lessening with each passing moment. She noticed the small things, the way Jack's hands moved with ease when handling the horses, the quiet confidence in his steps, and the genuine patience in his voice. It was unlike anyone she had met before, and she felt drawn to it, even as she reminded herself that she could not stay. By late morning, they reached a small stream that ran along the edge of the town. The water was clear, reflecting the sky above like a mirror. Emily knelt by the edge, letting her fingers touch the cool water. Jack followed, sitting on a nearby rock, watching her with a quiet fascination. "You travel alone, often?" he asked after a while, breaking the silence. Emily considered his question carefully. "Yes," she said finally. "It's safer in a way, easier to make decisions without having to consider anyone else. But it's lonely too, sometimes painfully so." Jack nodded. "I can understand that. he replied. I spend most of my days alone too, but I've learned to find comfort in routine, in the small moments. Sometimes, though, I wonder what it would be like to have someone else see the world with me. Emily glanced at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time with a flicker of hesitation and warmth. Maybe that's what I'm looking for, too, she admitted softly, though quickly added, not for long. Just a sense of connection, a moment that feels real before the road calls again. Jack smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. There was no pressure in his expression, only a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes life offered brief but meaningful connections. They spent the next hour talking lightly about the stars they had seen in other towns, the simple joys of a warm meal after a long ride, and the unexpected kindnesses from strangers. Each story they shared, each laugh, felt like a small bridge forming between them, connecting two people who had long lived separate lives. Eventually, Jack suggested they return to the town before it became too hot. Emily agreed, though she felt a growing reluctance to leave the peaceful surroundings of the stream. On the way back, she asked about Jack's family, if he had siblings, if he had ever left the town. He spoke with gentle honesty, revealing pieces of his life he rarely shared with anyone. Emily listened, captivated not just by the details, but by the quiet strength and honesty in his voice. By midday, they were back in town, and Emily realized how quickly the morning had passed. She felt an unfamiliar heaviness in her chest, the kind that comes when you know a moment of joy is temporary. Jack noticed the change in her expression and gently asked, "Are you all right?" Emily smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness. "I'm fine," she said, "just realizing how fast time moves when you're with someone who understands you, even briefly." Jack nodded, sensing her conflict. He wanted to say more, to convince her to stay, but he didn't. Instead, he offered a quiet reassurance. "Even if it's brief, it doesn't make it any less real," he said. "Moments like this stay with you, longer than you think." Emily felt a small warmth spread in her chest at his words. She wanted to linger, to let herself stay in this moment, but the promise she had made to herself, and to the world, remained strong. She would leave, as she always had, though a part of her wished things could be different. As the sun reached its peak, Emily decided to take a short walk through the town before resting. Jack followed at a distance, giving her space but remaining nearby. People in the town had begun their day, and Emily received polite nods and curious glances. She noticed the simplicity of the town life, the small interactions, the smiles shared over minor favors, the unspoken support among neighbors. It reminded her of what she had been missing in her travels. Connection, even if fleeting, was more meaningful than she had realized. By late afternoon, Jack suggested helping her with her horse again, preparing it for the next leg of her journey. Emily agreed, grateful for his help. As they worked side by side, she noticed how naturally their movements aligned, how easily conversation flowed, and how small gestures, a hand reaching out to steady the saddle, a shared laugh over a stubborn horse, created a bond she hadn't expected. When the task was done, they sat together under the shade of a large tree, the warm breeze rustling the leaves above. Emily leaned back slightly, closing her eyes for a moment, savoring the rare peace she had found in this small town. Jack watched her silently, feeling a growing admiration for the strength and resilience she carried, even in moments of quiet vulnerability. As the day began to fade into evening, Emily realized that she was enjoying herself more than she had allowed herself to in a long time. Yet the knowledge that she would leave by morning lingered like a shadow. She didn't speak of it, but Jack felt the unspoken tension in the quiet pauses between their words. He wanted to reach out, to ask her to stay, but he respected her wish. Sometimes, letting someone leave on their own terms was the greatest act of care you could offer. That evening, they returned to the saloon together. The warm light inside, the chatter of townsfolk, and the smell of dinner cooking created a comforting atmosphere. Emily thanked Jack quietly, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a subtle sadness. Jack responded with a small, understanding smile, offering no words that might pressure her. Instead, he simply stayed by her side as she settled in, sharing a quiet meal before night fell. As Emily prepared for the night, she felt a rare sense of hope, a sense that brief connections could still carry weight, that people could touch your life, even if only for a day. Jack, watching from a short distance, felt something similar: admiration, care, and a growing desire to protect this fragile moment they shared. The night closed in, soft and still, as two lives began to intertwine in quiet, unspoken ways. The day had been filled with small joys, meaningful conversations, and subtle gestures of connection. And though Emily would leave in the morning, both she and Jack knew that the memory of this day would linger, carrying the warmth of something real, even if fleeting. The next morning brought a soft golden light spilling across the town. Emily woke with a gentle start, her small room above the saloon filled with warmth. She stretched slightly and listened to the quiet sounds outside: the low clatter of a wagon, the distant neighing of a horse, and the faint murmur of townsfolk beginning their day. Her heart felt lighter than it had in months, though a small tension lingered in the back of her mind. She had promised herself she would leave soon, but the thought of saying goodbye to Jack made her chest tighten. Downstairs, Jack had already been up for hours, tending to chores at the ranch. The sun glinted off the rooftops as he worked, his hands busy but his thoughts on Emily. He remembered the way she had smiled the previous night, the warmth in her eyes, and the quiet strength she carried even in her weariness. He had seen travelers before, but something about her lingered, pulling at him in ways he had not felt before. When Emily stepped outside, carrying her small bag, Jack noticed her immediately. She had dressed simply, but there was an elegance in the way she moved, a careful grace that spoke of experience and resilience. She paused to take in the morning air, her gaze wandering over the fields and the distant hills. "Good morning," Jack said, approaching her with a friendly smile. "Did you sleep well?" Emily returned the smile, though faintly. "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted. "This town? It's peaceful in a way I didn't expect." Jack nodded, sensing the meaning behind her words. "It has that effect," he said. "Sometimes the quiet is all you need to hear yourself think." They walked together through the town, the streets bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Emily's eyes wandered over the familiar buildings, the general store, the blacksmith, the small church at the end of the street, and she noticed details she had missed the day before. Jack followed, sharing small stories about the town, the people who lived there, and the lives that often went unnoticed. His voice was steady, calm, and gentle, like a steady river flowing through a quiet valley. As they walked, Emily asked about his life, curious about the man who had quietly become a companion for her brief stay. Jack spoke honestly, telling her about the ranch, the animals, and the responsibilities that came with life in the town. He spoke of long days, hard work, and quiet nights spent under the stars, moments that were simple yet meaningful. Emily listened, fascinated by the rhythm of his life, the way he found contentment in small victories and daily routines. Eventually, Jack suggested a short ride through the fields outside town. Emily hesitated briefly, thinking about the hours ahead and the promise of leaving, but the idea of seeing the landscape from horseback excited her. She agreed, and together they saddled their horses. Jack's hands were steady and sure as he adjusted the saddle for her. And Emily couldn't help but notice the strength in his fingers and the careful attention he gave. They rode slowly through the fields, the soft clop of hooves on the dirt path filling the air. Emily felt a sense of freedom she had not felt in a long time. The wind against her face, the gentle sway of the horse, and the open sky above creating a feeling of release from the constant movement of her travels. Jack rode beside her, speaking occasionally about the animals grazing nearby, the tracks of deer in the distance, and the hidden streams that ran through the hills. At one point they reached a small clearing with a large oak tree providing shade. They dismounted, letting the horses graze on the grass, and sat beneath the tree. Emily leaned back against the trunk, closing her eyes for a moment, and felt a rare sense of peace. Jack watched her quietly, admiring the way the sunlight highlighted her hair and the calm strength in her posture.
"You seem at home here," he said after a moment, breaking the silence.
Emily opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "I feel lighter here than I have in a long time," she admitted. "It's strange, a place I don't know, and yet it feels like I belong for just a little while." Jack nodded, understanding. "Sometimes that's all we need, a moment that feels real, even if it's temporary," he said softly. They talked for hours beneath the oak tree, sharing stories from their pasts, fears, and dreams. Emily spoke of the many towns she had traveled through, the people she had met, and the challenges she had faced alone. Jack shared memories of his childhood, the lessons he had learned from the land, and the quiet joys of living a simple but honest life. With each story, the connection between them deepened, a silent understanding growing stronger with every word. As the afternoon sun began to lower, Jack suggested walking further into the hills to see the sunset. Emily agreed, and they set off slowly, taking in the rolling landscape around them. The sky gradually shifted from blue to gold, streaks of pink and orange painting the horizon. Emily paused, captivated by the beauty of the moment. Jack stood beside her, their shoulders brushing slightly, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them.
This is
"Beautiful," Emily whispered, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. Jack nodded, smiling. "It is. Makes you appreciate the quiet moments, doesn't it?" Emily turned to look at him, noticing the way the light softened his features, the calm in his eyes. She felt a pull in her chest, a mixture of longing and fear. She wanted to stay, to linger in this moment with him, but the promise she had made to herself echoed in her mind. She couldn't forget why she traveled, why she moved from place to place, leaving behind familiarity and comfort. Jack seemed to sense her hesitation. "You don't have to leave yet," he said softly. "Not if you don't want to." Emily shook her head, though a small smile tugged at her lips. "I have to," she said. "I promised myself, and I have to keep that promise." Jack nodded, though his eyes betrayed a quiet disappointment. "I understand," he said, "but even a short time can be meaningful. Don't forget that." They rode back to the town slowly, the air cooler now, filled with the scent of grass and earth. Emily felt a mixture of gratitude and sadness, grateful for the connection she had found, sad because it was fleeting. Jack sensed it too, and though neither spoke much, their silence was comfortable, filled with understanding and shared emotion. When they returned, Emily helped with the horses, brushing them down and ensuring they were comfortable. Jack assisted, their hands occasionally brushing, sending small sparks of connection between them. Emily laughed softly at one point, a sound that seemed to make the world around them pause for a heartbeat. Jack smiled in response, feeling warmth spread through him. As evening approached, Emily realized how deeply she had come to care for this man, despite the short time they had shared. She felt a pull in her heart, a desire to stay, but the road called her name. as it always did. Jack noticed the subtle change in her expression, the faint sadness in her eyes, and he knew she wrestled with the same conflict he did. They returned to the saloon together, sharing a quiet dinner. Emily's smile was tinged with melancholy, and Jack's gaze lingered on her as they spoke. He wanted to ask her to stay, but he respected her choice. Instead, he simply shared conversation, laughter, and moments of gentle understanding. Later, as Emily prepared for the night, she felt a strange combination of peace and longing. She had found something rare, a connection that felt real, meaningful, and sincere. And yet, she knew she would leave soon, as she always did. The thought of leaving Jack behind filled her with a quiet ache, one she had not expected to feel. Jack lingered nearby, watching her quietly, sensing the depth of her emotions. He felt a growing admiration for her courage, her strength, and the gentle kindness she carried even in moments of uncertainty. He wanted to tell her to stay, to let the day stretch a little longer, but he held back, respecting the promise she had made to herself. The night fell softly over the town, and Emily lay in her small bed, thinking about the hours spent together. She remembered the gentle strength in Jack's hands, the calm in his voice, and the quiet joy of simply being understood. She wondered if it was possible to find such moments in life, brief yet powerful enough to leave a lasting impression. Outside, the town grew still. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, twinkling like distant memories. Jack finally retired to his home, but sleep came slowly, his thoughts returning again and again to Emily, to the brief but meaningful connection they had shared, and to the hope that their paths might cross again someday. The day had been filled with small joys, quiet conversations, and moments of understanding that neither would forget. And though Emily would soon continue her journey, both she and Jack knew that the bond formed between them would linger, a reminder that even brief encounters could carry the weight of something real and unforgettable. The morning sun rose slowly over the small town, painting the wooden buildings in soft gold. Emily woke with a lingering feeling of unease, a quiet tension she couldn't ignore. Though she had spent the last 2 days with Jack enjoying moments she hadn't known she needed, she knew the time to leave was approaching. Her heart felt heavy, and the thought of saying goodbye made her stomach twist with a strange mixture of fear and sadness. Downstairs, Jack was already busy with his usual chores. The quiet rhythm of the ranch, the gentle lowing of cows, the soft clatter of tools, and the distant calls of birds filled the morning air. When Emily entered the yard, her small bag in hand, Jack noticed the subtle difference in her demeanor. She moved with the same grace as before, but her eyes held a shadow of worry he hadn't seen previously. "Good morning," he said softly, approaching her with a calm smile. "You look thoughtful." Emily offered a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Morning," she replied. "Just thinking about the day ahead. I have to continue my journey soon, and I can't help but wonder how to leave." Jack nodded, understanding without judgment. "It's hard," he said. "You've found something here, even if only for a short while. That makes leaving even more difficult." They spent the morning preparing Emily's horse for the road, brushing its coat, checking the saddle, and ensuring it was ready for travel. As they worked, there was a gentle tension in the air, a quiet recognition that this day was different, heavier than the previous ones. Neither spoke much, but the small touches, the brush of hands as they adjusted the saddle, the shared laughter over minor mishaps, spoke volumes about the connection that had grown between them. As they finished, Emily glanced toward the horizon. Her gaze lingered on the hills and the fields beyond the town, and she felt a pull in her chest. The road called her name, yet a part of her wanted to stay. She looked at Jack, noticing the way his hands moved naturally, his calm presence, and the quiet kindness in his eyes. She knew that leaving him would hurt more than she expected. Jack seemed to sense her inner conflict. "Emily," he said softly, "you don't have to go if you don't want to." "Not yet." Emily shook her head gently. "I promised myself. I can't break that promise. Not to myself, not to the world I'm trying to keep moving through." She paused, her voice softening. "But doesn't make it any easier." He had grown attached to her in the short time she had been in town, and the thought of her leaving was difficult to accept. Yet he respected her decision, knowing that forcing her to stay would only hurt both of them. That. As they prepared to mount their horses for a final ride before she left, a sudden noise startled Emily's horse. A rider from a neighboring town had arrived unexpectedly, riding quickly toward them. The horse reared slightly, and Emily struggled to regain control. Jack reacted immediately, moving closer to steady the horse and calm Emily's panic. His hands were firm but gentle, guiding her horse and reassuring her with his presence. "Steady," he said calmly. "It's all right. Just breathe." Emily's heart raced, but she followed his instructions, feeling the tension in the horse slowly ease. When the horse finally calmed, she exhaled sharply, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline. Jack kept a steady grip on the reins, ensuring everything was under control. "You're safe," he said softly, looking into her eyes. "Nothing will happen while I'm here." Emily's eyes glistened with gratitude, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel the comfort of being protected. It was a rare feeling for her, a sense of safety that she had not known in a long time. She realized just how much she had come to rely on Jack's calm presence, his quiet strength, and the steady reassurance he offered without words. After the unexpected scare, they decided to ride toward the hills, seeking a place of quiet away from the town. The afternoon sun bathed the fields in a warm glow, and the horses moved steadily along the dirt path. Emily's mind was busy, thinking about the moments she had shared with Jack, the laughter, the conversations, and the quiet understanding that had grown between them. She knew she would soon have to leave, yet part of her wished she could freeze time, hold on to this connection, and let it last longer. As they reached a small clearing, Emily dismounted, letting her horse graze on the soft grass. Jack followed, and they stood side by side, looking out at the hills rolling endlessly in the distance. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken thoughts and shared emotions. "You," Emily began softly. "I didn't expect to find someone like you in a place like this. I've been traveling for so long, meeting people, seeing towns, yet none of it felt real until now." Jack turned to look at her, the sunlight highlighting the calm determination in his eyes. "Sometimes the most meaningful things come when we least expect them," he said. "A single day, a single moment, it can change everything if we let it." Emily's gaze fell to the ground for a moment, a shadow of sadness crossing her features. "And yet, I have to leave," she whispered. "I can't stay. Not yet." Jack nodded, understanding, though his heart ached at her words. "I know," he said softly. "But even if you leave, this, what we have, it can stay with us in memory, in the way we carry it forward."
They spent the next hour walking through the hills, talking quietly about dreams, hopes, and fears.
Emily spoke of the many places she had visited, the people she had met, and the challenges she had faced alone. Jack shared memories of his life in the town, the lessons he had learned, and the quiet joys of working the land. Each story deepened their bond, and the understanding between them grew stronger. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, Emily and Jack reached a small stream running through the hills. The water sparkled in the fading light, and the sound of it flowing over rocks created a soothing melody. Emily knelt by the edge, letting her fingers touch the cool water. Jack joined her, sitting on a nearby rock, his presence calm and reassuring. "You've changed these past days," Emily said softly. "Not in a way I can explain, but something feels different. I feel alive, in a way I haven't felt in a long time." Jack smiled gently. "That's what life can do when we connect with someone. Even briefly, it leaves an impact, something that stays with us, no matter where we go." Emily's eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. She wanted to stay, to let this moment stretch on forever, but the road called her name. She would have to leave, and the thought filled her with a quiet ache. Suddenly, the sound of hooves pounding in the distance broke the peaceful moment. Emily tensed, her heart racing. A rider approached quickly, waving a letter. Emily's horse shifted nervously, sensing the sudden tension. Jack moved closer immediately, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Emily reached for the letter, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it carefully, reading the words. Her eyes widened and a shadow of worry crossed her face. She looked at Jack, her voice barely a whisper. "It's from someone I had to avoid, someone I can't ignore." Jack nodded, sensing the gravity of the situation. He didn't ask for details, respecting her boundaries. Instead, he offered quiet support, standing beside her as she processed a message. "Changes things," Emily said softly. "I have to leave sooner than I planned. I can't stay here anymore." Jack felt a sharp pang in his chest, but he nodded. "I understand," he said quietly.
Go where you need to. I'll be here.
"Thinking of you, hoping you'll find what you're searching for." Emily felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. She had found something rare with Jack, a connection, safety, and understanding, but the life she had built on the road called her away. She hugged him briefly, a silent farewell, and then mounted her horse. Jack walked beside her for a few steps, then watched as she rode toward the horizon, her figure gradually disappearing into the distance. As the sun dipped below the hills, Jack stood alone in the quiet clearing. His heart ached, yet he carried a sense of peace. He had shared something meaningful with Emily, even if only for a short while. He knew that moments like these left lasting marks, shaping who we were, and reminding us of the connections that could appear even in the briefest of encounters. Emily rode on, her thoughts filled with Jack, with the town, and with the rare peace she had found. Though she was leaving, she carried the memory of their time together, a reminder that even brief connections could leave a lasting impact on the heart. The morning sun rose softly over the town, casting a gentle glow on the wooden buildings. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her packed bag. Her heart felt heavy, weighed down by the knowledge that today she would leave. 2 days had passed since she arrived, and those hours had been some of the most meaningful she had ever experienced. She had laughed, shared stories, and felt understood in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. Yet the road called her name, as it always did, and she knew she had no choice. Downstairs, Jack was finishing chores at the ranch. The horses were fed, the fences checked, and the morning air carried the familiar sense of hay, earth, and fresh water. He paused as he looked toward the small window of the saloon above. Emily's figure moved quietly inside, and he felt a pang in his chest. He had grown attached to her in the short time she had been in town, more than he would have admitted even to himself. When Emily finally descended the stairs, Jack noticed her subdued mood. She offered him a small smile, but it did not reach her eyes. He approached her gently, careful not to intrude on her thoughts. "Morning," he said softly. "Are you ready for the road?" Emily nodded, her voice quiet. "Yes," she replied. "I have to go, Jack. I promised myself." Jack studied her for a moment, sensing the conflict in her eyes. He wanted to say so much, ask her to stay, tell her how important she had become. But he held back. "I understand," he said finally. "But I want you to know. The time we've shared has mattered more than you realize." Emily's eyes glistened with unshed tears.
"It has mattered to me, too," she whispered.
"More than I expected. I'll remember this place. And you. Always."
They walked together to the stables where Emily's horse was waiting. Jack helped her adjust the saddle and checked the straps carefully, his hands brushing hers in the process. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest at the touch, and she looked up at him, grateful for the quiet support he offered. "Be careful on the road," Jack said softly. "And take care of yourself. You deserve peace, even if it's hard to find." Emily nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She hugged him briefly, feeling the steady strength of his arms and the quiet reassurance in his presence. Then she mounted her horse, gripping the reins with steady hands, though her heart ached at the thought of leaving. Jack walked beside her as they moved toward the edge of town, his eyes lingering on her as she rode. The streets were quiet, and the town seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that this departure marked the end of something precious. Emily glanced back once, offering a small smile, and Jack waved silently, his chest tightening with the unspoken words between them. As she rode toward the horizon, Emily's thoughts were filled with the moments they had shared, the quiet conversations beneath the oak tree, the laughter over small mistakes, and the serene evenings watching the sun set over the hills. Each memory was a gentle reminder of the connection they had formed, a bond that felt rare and profound, even if it had lasted only a short time. Jack watched her disappear into the distance, his heart heavy but full of gratitude. He knew that life often brought brief encounters, moments that touched the soul and left lasting impressions. Emily had become one of those moments for him, a reminder of the beauty and fragility of human connection. The town returned to its quiet rhythm, the sounds of daily life filling the streets once more. Jack went about his work, tending to the ranch, feeding the animals, and repairing fences. Yet in the back of his mind, thoughts of Emily lingered, like shadows that refused to fade. He found himself smiling at the memory of her laughter, the way her eyes sparkled in the morning light, and the gentle warmth she had brought into his life. Meanwhile, Emily rode steadily, her horse moving confidently along the dusty road. She thought about the journey ahead, the places she would visit, and the people she would meet. Yet, in the midst of it all, Jack remained present in her mind, a quiet anchor she had not expected. She realized that even as she continued her travels, the memory of their time together would stay with her, shaping her thoughts and her heart in ways she could not yet fully understand. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Emily paused by a small stream to rest her horse. She knelt by the water, letting her fingers trail through the cool flow, and thought of Jack. She imagined him standing quietly in the clearing, watching over the ranch, carrying the memory of her as she carried the memory of him. For a moment she allowed herself to imagine returning, to see him again, though she knew the road made no promises. The journey continued, and Emily encountered other towns, other travelers, and new experiences. Yet the time she had spent with Jack remained distinct, a warm, glowing thread in the fabric of her life. It reminded her that even fleeting connections could carry profound meaning, and that moments of understanding and care could shape the heart more than years of routine and solitude. Back in the small town, Jack worked quietly in the ranch yard, but his thoughts often drifted to Emily. He thought about the way she had moved through the world, careful, strong, and yet gentle, and he realized that their brief time together had changed him. He was more aware of the importance of small moments, of the value of patience and understanding, and of the power of human connection. Days passed and life in the town continued. The rhythm of the ranch, the familiar faces of neighbors, and the quiet beauty of the landscape carried on, unchanged. Yet for Jack, the world felt subtly different. He carried Emily's memory with him like a secret treasure, a reminder of the possibility of connection even in the briefest of encounters. Emily, too, carried the memory forward. As she traveled through new towns and across open fields, she remembered Jack's steady presence, his quiet kindness, and the way he had made her feel understood and safe. The road was long, but she felt a sense of strength she hadn't known before, a quiet confidence nurtured by the bond they had shared. Occasionally she would think back to the oak tree, the clearing in the hills, and the stream where they had shared quiet moments of laughter and reflection. Each memory was vivid, carrying the warmth of sunlight, the sound of flowing water, and the gentle reassurance of being seen and understood. It was a reminder that even temporary encounters could leave permanent marks on the heart. Jack, on his side, sometimes found himself staring toward the horizon, imagining Emily riding along the dusty road, feeling the wind in her hair and thinking of him. He knew that life would continue, that new challenges and joys awaited both of them. But the memory of their connection remained, a quiet, enduring presence that shaped his thoughts and his heart. Months passed and the seasons changed. The town experienced the rhythm of life. New travelers arrived, crops grew and were harvested, and the ranch continued its steady work. Yet for both Jack and Emily, the brief time they had shared lingered, a delicate and precious memory. It reminded them that even in a world of constant movement, fleeting moments of understanding, care, and connection could leave lasting imprints. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Jack stood on the ridge overlooking the town. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, and he felt a quiet peace despite the ache in his heart. He thought of Emily, imagining her somewhere along the road, carrying the memory of their time together just as he carried it. He knew that life was unpredictable, that their paths might cross again, but even if they didn't, the connection they had shared was enough. Emily, meanwhile, rested near a quiet stream far from the town, watching the sunset and thinking of Jack. She felt a sense of gratitude for the brief moments of joy, laughter, and understanding they had shared. The memory of him was a steady presence, a reminder that even temporary encounters could carry lasting significance. She knew she would continue her journey, but she carried with her the quiet reassurance that some connections, no matter how brief, could change the course of a life. And so, life went on. Emily traveled, and Jack tended his ranch, both carrying the memory of their brief yet meaningful encounter. The world was wide, the road endless, but the bond that they had formed remained a quiet testament to the beauty of fleeting moments, the power of understanding, and the enduring strength of human connection. Even though they were apart, both Emily and Jack knew that the memory of their time together would never fade. It would live in their hearts, guiding them, comforting them, and reminding them that even a single day could leave a lasting mark, a day when two souls met, shared understanding, and quietly changed each other forever.